permission to be human and what it means to be a human being? Can you just be? Or do you need to take permission to be a certain way or not a certain way? And while I've been preparing to speak to you, a couple of days back, I saw the news in the paper that a state in our country has introduced a law to say that when young people marry, they must have the parents' permission in order to get married. And I thought about it because as I grow up, you always hear about these things as, even before I became a feminist, love marriage and arranged marriage. And I could never really understand the difference because it's not as though arranged marriages are loveless marriages. The real issue there was permission marriages, not permission marriages. And not just that, permission of a certain kind. Because I know from my personal experience, and I'm going to tell you about when I got married. They don't, people are uncomfortable if parents give the wrong kind of permission. Permission must mean permission to obey certain pre-existing rules and traditions. It shouldn't be permission to allow freedom. So when I was to get married, my boyfriend and I went off. My parents were with me, and we just had filled up a form a month before, and we went off to the magistrate in my hometown, Bhilai. It's a small town in Chhattisgarh. So the minute we congregated there, a sort of bunch of motley people, my husband, his some family members, my parents, you could see that magistrate there was very irritated. And he said loud enough for us to hear, why don't they go to a pandit to get married, which means, the priest. Why do they have to come to me? So he didn't want to have to give permission to our marriage, intercaste, motley crowd, none of the correct ways of getting married. So, the thing is, as I became, my friends could see that I was slowly coming to a boil. And so my uncle, he came up to me because he realized my parents were there. But the magistrate saw that my husband's parents were not there. They were not well, they were in another city. So he began grilling him. Where's your mother? Where's your father? And you could see that I was getting agitated. My uncle came and whispered in my ear, do they think we've abducted him? So at least he made me laugh, and somehow we managed to get that certificate from him. But I realized that the magistrate was not happy that my parents were present, that they gave me the permission to do this. And I keep thinking today, it's very easy, I think, especially in a women's college here, to say, oh, how ridiculous it is to demand permission. So I want to actually take the question more seriously. And I want to tell you that, in fact, what if this is the common sense position? From my experience, I can tell you that across communities, castes, religions, across all sorts of institutions, I think the common sense opinion, the common majority opinion, would be that this is a good thing, even among women. So, you have statistics that show that 40% of what are classed as rape cases in our statistics, they are actually not rape cases. They are cases of consensual elopement, consensual love. And the parents of the girl have basically said, the parents of the woman have said this is an abduction, and so on and so forth, and this is a rape. Then you have 60% of women in this country have to take permission to go out of the house to do anything. And this is very normal. If you think about it, I can say it was even in my very permissive household. You were expected to take permission. And what we were told was that this is for your safety. And I think the law also says that it's to keep the women safe, to make sure they're safe. But I think the question is whether human being is the right to be safe or the right to take risks. That's where I want to suggest that let's consider the issue. Suppose the majority feels that this is a good thing, and I'm a minority. And when I came to university, I remember there was a friend of mine who said, he became a friend. So I was taking a class on gender. He heard it all, feminist talk, and then he said, my grandmother was happy, why are you young women not happy? He was a young man. But, I said, well, let's assume that our grandmothers were happy, they were not. But let's assume that the majority is happy. Does the individual have a right to do something the community doesn't want? And that is the fundamental issue that our constitution also thought about. Should the individual have the right, or should the village have the right to basically make norms and all of that? And this is a debate now that is happening across the world, where people are saying, a lot of people are saying, individual human rights as a universal, all human beings have the right, they don't need permission to have the rights. That is a Western thing, or in the West they're saying it's a liberal elite thing. And we should have the right to run our countries according to culture, according to civilizational norms and so on. And it's in fact undemocratic to expect the majority to put up with something which they do not agree with. And I think that raises a very important and serious question. That is the question of what is democracy. So is the world order to be a collection of majorities, where the individual has only one choice, whether to belong to the majority and obey or not? So, is individual freedom opposed to community? And I argue that individual freedom is the foundation, condition for community. You're free, you use your freedom to form communities. That's being human. That means interacting with people who are different, and the right to change communities and experiment with new ways of being together. So individual freedom is not in that capitalist sense of individual freedom to compete. It's the freedom to cooperate. It's the freedom to argue, certainly. But it's not all about, survival of the fittest, let's fight it out. It's about cooperating, and that's how we've survived as a species. And so, I think the thing to question is the idea of what that community is going to be. Is it going to be majority versus minority? Or can you have other ways of thinking about being a community? And I think that, how does one say, oh, something is a majority? In order to form a majority, you have to exclude something. You can't have a majority without first defining a minority that you're excluding. This is not me. This is what we all believe. Which means those of you all have no right to change your minds later and all of that. So these are very static categories, and they invite conflict. And I would say that democracy is the right of the individual to form communities that are inclusive. And inclusive means that you approach the world and you approach different people without fear. And I think it's so easy to be told to be afraid. Women are told, you must be afraid. For your safety, you shouldn't be free. For the same reason, you have, communities because you have no way of actually allowing that happiness to be shown. You have no way to allow difference. And I'm seeing this thinking growing a lot, and in fact, it's almost a uniting factor internationally. In 1945, the uniting factor was universal human rights and a universal standard of democracy. But now you're having Russia, or China, and now even America, certainly in India, certainly in so many parts of the world, people were genuinely arguing that, look, this is actually a threat. This kind of universal rights, to say something is universal, there's a universal way of being human, that's not okay. And we should be able to decide, depending on whether we are Russian, or whether we are white, or whether we are, or whatever it is, a particular identity of ours. And I think that that frees us identities so much, and it depends upon telling one identity that if the other identity is allowed to enter, if someone immigrates, if someone is an outsider, if they come in, if they marry our women, if our women start having children who will be counted as theirs. And this isn't just here, this is all over the world right now. The idea of great replacement. This is happening all over the world. And I think that the way to respond to that is with a certain kindness, and to ask this question, that you see that the idea of individual human rights, it's like a boat. If there's a leak in one place, we are all sunk. So if you say that I want the rights to be a certain way, to have a certain culture, to have a certain identity, you won't be able to decide what that identity is tomorrow, you, your children, if you're denying someone else that right today. Today you may think that, well, no, in order to protect my identity, I have to deny someone else's. But that's not how these things work. And I think about it, therefore, that sometimes you need a certain set of rules to stand between you and your worst instincts. So there was this lovely movie in 1986 called Chameli's Marriage. So it was a little rom-com kind of thing where Chameli is this village girl, she falls in love with a guy, and they're two silly young people in love, but they happen to belong to other castes, opposite castes. And at one point in that light comedy, there's a dark moment, because Chameli's parents say, you can't get married, and they beat her up, they lock her in a brief period of darkness. But then, she manages to escape. She slaps her uncle, she manages to escape, and they arrive at the place to get married, and they're getting married, while the parents arrive. And Chameli's parents say, we are her parents, we are denying her permission, so of course she can't get married. And then you have, Amjad Khan, who is in the role of a nice uncle lawyer. He steps forward, and he kind of addresses the audience that's watching the film as well as the village there, saying, look, here's her school certificate. She's above 18 years old. She's an adult, and according to our constitution, she's allowed to marry whoever she likes. Parents cannot deny permission, government cannot deny permission, the village cannot deny permission. So, all's well that ends well, and so on. But today, if that is removed, that little constitutional, little fragile, little safety net is removed between us and our worst instincts, and it can be anyone. Okay, I count myself as a leftist, but I know that, any idea, even if it is my idea, if I say it's the only idea, China's next door. One leader, one idea, one way of being Chinese, it's the same exact thing as, anywhere else in the world, whether it's Iran or Afghanistan or anywhere else, indeed. So I think that having a set of rights which are established, and they were established as universal not because some countries decided and some leaders decided. It was because countries like India that were fighting for freedom, Africa, India, Asia, they sent people to say, we're going to help you draft that universal human rights document, declaration. And before us, feminist movements had fought for women, had fought for is going to keep including. And we have to decide as individuals everywhere in the world, are we going to be part of that inclusion? Are we going to say that human being is not a fixed category into two genders and certain ways of family and this and that? Or are we going to say there are so many ways of being human? Human being is a present continuous category. That's why it is being. And so if you find human beings are going to keep finding ways of being, and democracy has to be the right to allow people to find their way, to change their way, and even to fight for more democracy. Democracy is not just a fixed ceiling. It is the foundation on which you create the conditions for freedom to imagine new ways of being human. And that's why I feel that a world that we are heading to right now, I'm a little afraid of that world. Because if you form a world depending on permission, where someone has the power to deny you the permission to do this, to be this, to be your authentic self, to have the right to make mistakes, to take risks, that kind of a world where a human being can exist freely only with permission, I think that's a world that is going to drain humanity from ourselves. And so I'd just like to end by saying to all of you that nowadays I really think about the need to defend those fragile safety nets that people who came before us put in place. And so defending rights, that's really